The death of God is about the drying up of a horizon of meaning and of a whole form of human life.
Where do we stand in the illusion it makes? What kind of space are we invited into?
The material relations between people become social relations between things. When we look at toasters, corn, and TVs,
we still, to a large extent, live in the interregnum between worlds, if you will, or between paradigms. Not many people in the history of the world have faced that.
Zero Squared is the Zero Books podcast.
All right, Ben Burgis of the Give Them an Argument podcast and YouTube channel, the author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, author of the book Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, and all-around leftist micro-niche celebrity and good guy is the guest today. And we're going to talk about canceling and the culture war and his book, Canceling Comedians. But I wanted to start by reflecting on our conversation yesterday. We were talking about how to publicize the book and what kind of content to create around it. And we were both feeling, I think, tired of the culture war. Not that we were ever enamored with it,
right?
But now, it truly seems like a dead horse in a way. But on the other hand, it's just as prominent and dominant as ever, with the arguments around and even legislation around critical race theory. And every day on Twitter you can find another example of the culture war happening. And I'm wondering why it seems so tired to us. And I'm thinking it might have some connection to what I'm going to say is the death of the Dirtbag Left. That the Dirtbag Left could take up the kind of an anti-woke, a nuanced anti-woke stance as a way to try to gain some political traction and get power within the Democratic Party. But since the loss of the Bernie Sanders campaign and the kind of feeling of overall defeat around a myriad of issues like Medicare for All, that tool doesn't seem to be useful for anyone anymore except the right. The anti-woke position just seems like a right-wing position now. And the left doesn't have any tools at the moment, doesn't seem to have a way in. What remains of the Dirtbag Left or the left? What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I like that you introduced me as a leftist micro niche celebrity. Was talking to my younger brother a little while ago, and we were talking about how when I die I should have my Twitter follower count on my tombstone. It's like my proudest accomplishment in life.
Right. How many do you have?
I want to say like 36,000 and change.
Oh my God, you've got more than our imprint has. That is not right. You need to I'm going to have to follow your followers. Anyway.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I do, by the way, finally have a take on critical race theory, but maybe we should save that for the parrot room. That's too, it's too hot for the main show. But, okay. Or whatever, we can do it.
Yeah, no, we'll save it for the parrot room. Everybody needs to pony up $5 to hear Ben Burgess's hot take on critical race theory, so they can clip it out, pass it around on Twitter, and get him canceled again.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot of really productive discourse on that. But yeah, which is actually itself kind of leads in, I think, the broader thing you're talking about, because it's like, man, it's not like I don't have opinions about these things, but yeah, I don't have I don't quite have the same fire in my belly about it, that I had like a year ago. And maybe some of that is, I'm going to resist, my personality and professional training all make me want to nitpick everything about the framing, but I think I'm just gonna go for the heart of the question, which is that.
Do the nitpicking too, because we got time to kill here. So, but do the heart of the question first.
Sure. I think on the heart of the question, I think that why is it that I don't feel quite the same fire in my belly about it? I think probably does have something to do with that atmosphere of defeat in the last year and, the last several months, especially, that we've all been, been dealing with, that I think probably, certainly those of us who thought that the Bernie campaign was a really important political opening, and probably even equally people who didn't, right? Because just because you have that as an abstract position, right, doesn't mean that your sensibility or your kind of sense of the direction things are moving in, or your feelings about it are going to be totally detached, from those political changes. Mm-hmm. That I think that probably because of that atmosphere of defeat, it's like, in a weird way, I think I have in some certain respects actually become even more anti-woke than I was when I wrote the book, but like I get less excited about talking about it. I think that some of that probably does have to do with how much in the last year the right wing has just jaws of death, locked on to some of these issues. Not that they haven't always done culture war, of course. I mean, that's their main thing and has been for longer than either of us have been doing this, but like in a different way and in a way that has that takes a lot of, I think, the justified critiques that are made on certain things from within, the left or just broadly progressive, kinds of spheres, and like just does this like weird indefensible caricature of it that doesn't really make sense. Mm-hmm. So that's probably some of it. But also I think that probably some of it is like, I mean, when you feel hopeful and then you say, okay, here's this crap that's getting in the way, then you might feel sort of like righteous indignation about that, and be like really eager to like sort of make your case, for moving away from all of that. And when you feel defeated, then but you're also just drowning in all that stuff that seemed like crap that was getting in the way before, then it's, you're probably going to have a different emotional relationship to it, which I know I am, I do now. I mean, I think that and that doesn't mean that I've given up on any of it, that I don't think that all those critiques that are made in the book are correct. I certainly do. Or that it's not like important to get away from all of that, which I do. I think maybe though that it's like, I feel like, I don't know. I've very mixed feelings about this. Maybe this is more introspective than I should be in the main show.
No, go ahead.
But I think that, like on the one hand, I do feel like the pathologies of the left are things that we ignored our own peril, and that the instinct that a lot of people who basically have the right views about a lot of this stuff, from my perspective, have to sort of ignore it all and to kind of like, grit your teeth and, pretend that it's not going on, I think can be a self-destructive one, because, just sort of taking that image that, is a central point in the book of the DSA convention, and, people, doing points of personal privilege about whispering and crosstalk, and how the guy who said whispering and crosstalk said, hey guys, and hey guys, it's gendered language, that like, if you don't object to it, then those people become the face that everybody else sees during the only face that everybody else sees. and you become identified with it. And if this is the only moment, there's no telling what moment we'll happen to be lucky enough to have somebody's attention. And if that's the one, right, then you're screwed. So I think that is that sort of strategic calculation about why it is that's actually important to plant that flag that, you can be a leftist and hate all that shit. And you should be, is important to send a message to people for whom all that stuff might.
I just want to say I agree with you.
Yes. People listening to this as a podcast. Doug just did the jazz hands non-clapping affirmation. So yeah, I think it's a really important signal to send. And I still agree with that strategic calculation. But I guess if we're just talking about emotional reaction, I sort of feel like, man, I don't know. I just want to be done with all like thinking about stuff like this. Mm-hmm. And there's a sort of Bernie Sanders, who in my if I'm tweeting about this, like I'll sort of do the like half ironic, half not, and I'm not gonna like really disambiguate it thing where like I refer to him as my beloved grandfather, but obviously I do have my criticisms of Bernie Sanders and some of his strategic approach, especially since the election. But one thing that I really did like was when he was interviewed by Maureen Dowd, who, for people who are too emotionally well-adjusted to read New York Times columns, Maureen Dowd is like the most vapid person on there. I mean, she does this weird thing where she's sort of half meta commenting on politics, but in this very apolitical way. And it's very, I don't know.
She's a political gossip columnist.
Yeah. She's essentially a political gossip columnist. Sure. And so she interviewed Bernie Sanders, and they were like sitting at a diner, and she and he actually came with this like handwritten list on a sheet of notebook paper of topics he was willing to talk about. And she'd try to ask him about other stuff. Oh, do you think AOC could ever be president? Whatever. And he'd like actually hold up the list, be like, here are the list of the topics that I'm willing to talk about. And there's something about that feels right to me. It's like, no, I mean, fucking ask me about healthcare. I'm not gonna tell you, I actually will in the parent room, but like for the sake of this example, I'm not going to tell you what I think about critical race theory because I don't care. I want to talk about healthcare.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you said after I asked that question at the start with the opening gambit that you had some nitpicks about the framing.
Yeah.
What would you do the nitpicks now? What's
sure.
wrong with my frame?
Sure.
And just to clarify, my frame was that since we no longer have a feeling that the dirtbag left, the anti-woke left, has a potential to aid in the transformation of the Democratic Party to become more social democratic and change the trajectory of the country towards some sort of, let's just say, socialist agenda. We now no longer feel that the anti-woke arguments that are leftist arguments have much power. That would, just to reiterate the initial frame.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I don't disagree with that as much as I thought maybe earlier. I mean, I guess the one thing that always sort of yanks at me is, since I'm so used to seeing it done in pretty disingenuous ways, is when people talk about like, the dirtbag left, even though I know that's a phrase that was coined by a OG dirtbag leftist, Amber Lee Frost, who and really in her case, very specific, like, she meant something very specific, or at least originally, which is actually, funnily enough, I mean, I like Amber. I've interviewed her a couple times, but I'm not sure that what she means is particularly something that I'm actually that enamored of. But which
what was it that she meant? What did the dirtbag left mean?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that okay. So I think there's part of what she meant by it, which is like really the more consistent element. But there's a sort of whole. She, ironically enough, in current affairs, which I don't think I'm
Now,
You
why
know,
is that ironic, Ben? To explain why you say it's ironically in Current Affairs. Current Affairs was originally a big journal of the Dirtbag Left, wasn't it?
it was, yeah.
Angela Nagel. They published Amber Ali Frost. They published, I don't know who else, but other people.
Freddie DeBoer.
Freddie DeBoer.
Yeah, not that I exactly think that, you know, all those people necessarily fall into the category, but like I think the sense that people often use the phrase "dirtbag left," those people all certainly would be, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that you know, Current Affairs has taken a turn away from dirtbagginess pretty hard, you know, in the last few years. I mean, I don't think any of those people would be published, or if they were, you know, they wouldn't be published writing those articles that they wrote, you know, for Current Affairs now. I mean, in all of those cases, I mean, I can remember specific pieces they wrote in Current Affairs that, you know, I mean, I have, and I'm not, you know, my intention here is not to throw, you know, personal shade. I mean, I had, you know, I like Nathan. It's not a state secret that we don't see eye to eye on some of the stuff. Mm-hmm. But like, man, I remember the articles that Angela and Freddie were writing for Current Affairs in like 2017. Yeah. And that's stuff that I don't think, like, I mean, whatever. I mean, we'll really, to really pull no punches about this, right? I don't think Jacobin would publish some of that stuff now, much less Current Affairs. You know, even though, like, you know, Bhaskar Sankara, the main editor of Jacobin, probably agrees with every sentence of those articles, but like, you know, they're somewhat, you know, and this is not.
Do you have a particular article by Freddie DeBoer maybe that you don't think Jacobin would publish today?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they would, because it's not like, because they do sometimes do stuff like this, but I think that generally speaking, Jacobin is like somewhat controversy averse, right? That they have that, like, over the course of having written many articles for them in the last couple of years, I've kind of developed a sense of what they'll probably publish and what they probably won't publish, and sometimes I'm surprised, right? Sometimes I'm wrong, but like, but I think that they have, you know, but there are, even though, you know, like, I think, you know, Bhaskar is somebody I don't think I have any substantive disagreements about this stuff with, and you know, I think that they're very conscious about, like, picking battles, and and that there are and that they, and sometimes, like, battles that I want to pick sometimes just because, like, I'm pissed off, right? You know, that they'll won't necessarily want to pick at that moment, right? So, like, I think that there's an article by Angela Nagel from, like, I want to say 2017, maybe 2018 in Current Affairs that had the phrase self-flagellation in the title, you know, something like the politics of self-flagellation. I don't think that was it exactly, but it's like, it was something along those lines, and it was kind of what that sounds like, you know, that it was about how so much of left politics is about, or, you know, so much of broadly progressive politics maybe is about this sort of weird toxic moralism, and, you know, they're like, I don't know that I agree with every single point in the article, but I mean, when I read that, this was like already long after the period of Angela Nagel writing for Current Affairs. I thought, man, it's a good article, and I don't think that they would publish that now, because I think he has very different sensibilities about this stuff. Or like Freddie DeBoer, I remember he had one about why, like, representational politics was stupid, which might be a little bit of a caricature of the article, but it was like, I think the jumping off point was he was reacting to the, like, why, you know, Oscar's so white, you know, that whole thing. But yeah, so back during this period of Current Affairs, when they tended to be somewhat more friendly towards these critiques, and I don't know, maybe if Nathan Robinson was on here, maybe he would say, no, I still agree with such and such, but I don't like the direction people, I don't know what his line about this would be, right? But my perception is that they've become much less friendly towards these sorts of critiques over the course of the last few years. And and back in that period, Amber wrote an article called, I want to say, In Defense of Vulgarity. Vulgarity was in the title. and it was in political vulgarity. I don't know, and the article was all about, like, it was basically a fuck civility article that it's actually really good for the left not to sort of let the Trumps of the world have the corner on political vulgarity. And she went back to the history of the French Revolution and the sort of like early like revolutionary agitation where there'd be like very like sexual like parodies about Marie Antoinette and things like that. And so to the extent that that's part of what the whole dirtbag left thing means, then I don't know. I'm not unambivalent about that, right? Like, I think that
get in the frame, Ben. Get in the frame.
I think that man, that felt symbolic. So I think
leave that in.
Yeah. And
oh yeah, it did. I'm like, don't criticize the dirtbag left. Right? No, I don't mean that way. Well, okay. Can I voice? Let me try to be clairvoyant and voice what I think your objections might be.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, that the reason you don't want to give, she's saying you don't want to give Trump the market. You don't want to let Trump people corner the market on being vulgar. But the reason to avoid being vulgar and crude and using tactics of humiliation as political weapons is because you, in the process, debase yourself, and you risk losing sight of the reasons, the principles, and even the aims of your politics, and it can become simply straightforward exercises of power. And the left doesn't really have the actual far left doesn't have the power. So if you're going to play, games of personal reputation destruction or humiliation or insults, the leftist is more likely to lose in that kind of combat. And we benefit from some rules and some civility
well, actually, like, there was a point, man, I don't even remember, 2019, 2020 sometime, when Michael Brooks told me that an article he'd really like to exist, and he said that for a variety of reasons he wouldn't be the right one to write it, but a article that he'd like to exist would be In Defense of Respectability Politics, which is, what I said, I'm a little ambivalent. Of course, that example maybe goes to that point, because I mean the reason that he didn't want to personally write it is that it probably would have seemed a little ridiculous, coming from him. And I've certainly participated in that, and whatever. But but also I think it makes some sense if you think even about some of his public commentary, that like where you think back to sort of the example of the civil rights movement and your sort of Martin Luther Kings and Bayard Rustins and all those people who were these like basically very earnest social democrats who like wear pressed suits and have like and would like that there's something to the idea that you'd actually like aim at respectability in a certain way in the course of pursuing radical politics that might actually make some sense, at least in some contexts. And certainly I think the way that some people on the left, particularly the online left, in the last several years have gotten like very addicted to this style of politics that is all about kind of mockery and can and just kind of dunking on things that like this is something that is is not an unambiguous positive at the very least, right? That there are reasons I think not to. I think that I think it's good to have a sense of humor, and there are situations in which maybe you shouldn't pull your punches, but like I wonder if we've like this sort of constant diet of that, right, has had particularly good effects on us, in the last few years, and if and certainly if like you said, since we have very little actual power, if we're really gonna benefit, right, from sort of constantly being in that mode, which is certainly something that Michael was thinking about at the very end. He, in that like little last fragment of writing, that he wrote like the weekend before he died, that was, I quoted extensively in the Cosmopolitan Socialism of Michael Brooks article I read for Jacobin, and I read out the whole thing on a like tribute stream we did for him right after the anniversary of his death, and he says something there about trying to be more intentional, even in critique, and maybe some of that's like his like hippy dippy Buddhist side coming out, but I don't know. I think there's probably something to that. All that said, like, I've listened to Chapo more consistently than any other podcast for the last 5 years because I enjoy it, and I think that like. I think being a little too, and like I don't necessarily advocate that we go nuts being like too precious, about rough jokes, and there is something to this sort of idea that it might be good to have a left media ecosystem, that has some Chapos in it, like I guess maybe I just think that like. We could benefit from some other approaches, maybe, having a more prominent place and it not just being that. But in any case, like part of why I push, like my instinct is always to push back when I hear the dirtbag left being used as a category, is that I've seen so many instances of, like, there was a Daily Beast article, I don't know, a few months ago, where the title was about the dirtbag left. And so often that phrase is kind of used to mean like whatever, anybody who, I don't know, maybe has some sort of non-woke position and is a leftist, and who often the author dislikes, right? So it's like Chapo and it's, Jimmy Dore and, whatever. It's like these things feel very unlike each other to me.
Yeah, they're totally different. But I want to, someone else who gets thrown in, maybe not as part of the dirtbag left, but as like an anti-woke left, or the alt left, or the fake left, would be Glenn Greenwald.
So let's do Glenn. I just wanted to say that, and I don't have anything really to say about this. I just want to register and we can move on. But is as far as other nitpicks go, I think that like what the relationship is between, in the long term, between that sort of left strategy you're talking about and the Democratic Party as an institution, I think is a little bit more ambiguous than that. That said, I think fully defending that would probably involve me having like a worked out view about like, okay, do we,
how do we relate to the Democratic Party? We could do a podcast on that sometime.
We could do a podcast on that. We could do like a series of podcasts on that. Because it's an incredibly fraught and complicated subject. I don't know what to think entirely, because like I think to a certain extent you have to right now, given present political conditions. But I also think that it's like a death trap in certain ways, and I don't know. Yeah,
well, I'm with the Platypus Affiliated Society on this. Is what we have to do is build a dictatorship of the proletariat.
Okay, well, okay, we've settled it. So now that we've decided to have a dictatorship of the proletariat, then I guess that sorts that out. We could do
sorted. Okay. Yeah. I knew that would get to you if I said that.
I was totally. I mean, you like that totally worked. I was halfway through the sentence and I was mad.
Right. But have you done any of their panels? Have you done a platypus?
I actually did, and I should say I have softened a bit, on them. I did one on like free speech with them, and it was they like there were people there who said very like party line platypus things that I didn't agree with, but like overall I thought it was a good event.
Yeah. I have we'll save the platypus conversation for the
Fair enough.
Okay, so Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah, let's do it.
You were recently on in his Substack and on his YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, System Update. Yep.
Yeah, and you've interviewed him before. I've interviewed him once. I've seen him be interviewed lots of times. Do you think that Glenn Greenwald is hewing to a certain kind of respectability politics, or is he a dirtbagger?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean a little of each, right? Like because he's pretty he's pretty no holes barred on Twitter, and he's not at all conflict averse, to put it mildly. Right. And I think that probably my preferred speed of picking fights is probably somewhere in between, the editors of Jacobin and Glenn Greenwald, right? Right.
I was listening to Blocked and Reported, and this is probably a big reveal that I listened to that show.
Yeah.
That tells you everything you need to know about me. But I find it
it's very generous of you that you're not outing me as a regular Blocked and Reported listener.
Oh, oops! Now you've added yourself. But I find it to be an entertaining podcast. I don't find it to be necessarily politically enlightening or helpful exactly, but it's entertaining. And they had a whole section of one of their podcasts about Glenn Greenwald's tweets in response to a story that had been written.
Was it
by the dog owner?
Yeah,
the dog owner got a dog during the COVID lockdown. The dog was a biter, couldn't be trained not to bite, had really hurt some people apparently, and had to be put down. And Greenwald was just sure that this person was the worst pet owner in the universe. And was really hard on her. And I understand he has a lot of feelings about dogs because he owns dogs, but the fact that Greenwald spent time on Twitter going after this person who'd written a story about putting their dog down, to me told me that basically Greenwald does have a Twitter problem. Like he has a part of the call out culture.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, I don't know. Can I just do 2 minutes of my take on Glenn Greenwald before we get into the specifics?
Yeah.
So my view about Glenn Greenwald is that one, I really think as much as I think we should get away from obsession with overall evaluation of individuals anyway, and that's a big part of my point in the book and other contexts. But since inevitably that's what we're doing here, right? We're gonna have a Glenn Greenwald conversation. There's some evaluation of individual stuff going on here, and I think if you are gonna play that game, I mean, I think that Glenn has done some genuinely, using this word, in a very judicious way, genuinely heroic things. First with the NSA story, and then even more so in some ways in the last couple of years in Brazil. I mean, I think the second time I interviewed him, when it was about his new book about Brazil, I regard as probably the best episode we ever did on Give Them an Argument. And it was, I mean, he went through, there were months where every single day on Brazilian Twitter, one of the trending topics was deport Glenn. And, he couldn't go anywhere without an armored car and armed guards. And And that's like a level of, I mean, Jesus. I mean, I write books and talk on podcasts, right? I mean, like I think that any discussion of this has to start with like, this is something that I think there's something very wrong with you if you're a leftist in the United States and relative comfort, whatever, and you don't have some respect for those contributions. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that politically, I think he has bad takes on certain issues. I think the Senate, like weirdly, like I think he had a surprisingly actually bad take on that when that came up. We can get into that, but just to finish the overall take, but that's also a relatively rare exception. I think that like most of his substantive like policy positions are good. Like probably 90% of them, are good from my perspective. And he has, and at least in terms of like his work on the Substack and the Intercept before that and the Guardian before that and Salon before that, right? I mean, like the Twitter fights and stuff are unrepresentative of what most of it's about, and a lot of it has been about very important issues. And I think he's done, he's done good work. That said, I would criticize, and I also find him personally likable. That said, I think I often disagree with his judgment about people. When he sort of perceives, relates to media figures and whatnot, I often think that the people who he has an instinct to defend or to sort of, I'm often not all on the same page about that. And there have been times when he not to just to sort of be honest about it and cop to the high school aspect of this, there have been times that he's gone after, people who I, mean something to me. I thought, hey, come on, man. Right. And also I do have some larger disagreements with him about like political strategy, not like policy, but, but political, like how to evaluate the landscape and, who's a potential ally or enemy, things like that. Right. Like that. I have some disagreements about that. And also, yeah, I mean, I do think like, look, I say this from the perspective of someone who's too online. I mean, I'm clearly too online. I think that if you like followed me around for a week and saw like how much time I spend, on my phone or on the computer and, and engaging with what, when, and you compare that to the list of like shit that I have to do for various commitments, and think like you'd have an intervention and you'd be right to do so. I'm too online. But Glenn Greenwald is like way, way, way too online. Like clearly he's just massively too online and too invested in Twitter shit. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I think that it would do him. Maybe he can't, right? Maybe for the kind of media stuff that he does, he couldn't do this. But I think that he would massively benefit from somehow just taking a long break. And I don't know if he like gave if he hired somebody where he lives in Brazil to like, transcribe, he could like write his Substack post in a typewriter and, hand it to them to transcribe and put online, that he would be better off. And probably the effect of him doing that is we'd all have a much more balanced view of him.
Well, I want to tell a Tinder story, and it will actually relate to Glenn Greenwald. I'm going through a divorce, so I'm on Tinder now. And everyone should look me up on Tinder, hit me up. But I matched with a 35-year-old woman who I thought was really cute. She was dressed like a millennial. She's like, striped pants, and she just had a style to her. And I swiped right, and luckily enough, she swiped right later. I was shocked. And I reached out to her, said, hey, I want you to be my future ex-wife. And and she's like, well, I'm sorry, I'm going back to LA. And then she kind of figured out who I was over the course of the conversation. She's like, oh, you work for Zero Books? I love Zero Books. I'm a huge Michael Brooks fan, rest in power, blah blah. And she was on the left, does social work of some kind, and then she said, "What do you think of Glenn Greenwald?"
Well, good thing she already said she's going back to LA, so you can answer that one honestly.
right. And I told her, I sent her links to like the I love Glenn Greenwald video that I made, and why you should too, or something, and the interview I did with him, and like she gets back to LA and she's like, "I want to talk to you on the phone." And so and she's very nice actually. She likes Adolph Reed. She's Chapo fan, she's a dirtbagger, let's say.
Yeah.
But she just couldn't, she said, "I understand he's done a lot of good journalistic work, but I think he's a narcissist and I hate his guts." And my response was, "Well, yeah, you're perfectly free and it's fine for you to hate Glenn Greenwald's guts. I think he would admit he's an asshole. So but nonetheless, he does good work as a journalist.
It's kind of, yeah. I was just,
I was really disappointed that she lived in LA, and
which is kind of funny.
She could have been my future ex-wife. I
mean, what I'm getting out of the story is just moved to Los Angeles.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, yeah, go for it. But
I can't. I got kids here. And,
it's fine. It's fine. Your ex-wife can take care of them. So, yeah, no, but sure. No, all I was going to say is as I was listening to that story, I was just reflecting on the fact that there are good things about this and bad things about this, but I'm married to somebody who has progressive political inclinations and will sometimes take an interest in what's going on in the news, but is hilariously far from being the kind of weird political obsessive that we are, and I think every time I say Glenn Greenwald, I have to say the guy with all the dogs, and she's like, "Oh yeah, right, okay, I know which one you're talking about." Right? Or Sam Cedar, it's like, "Oh yeah, he does the voice of Hugo on Bob's Burgers." It's just like, "Oh yeah, right, Hugo, okay, I remember now."
Right. It's funny that he's the guy with all the dogs, but does he make sure that his dogs are heard in every appearance he makes, whether it's on Fox News or your podcast.
Well, I think there are like 100 dogs wandering around, so I don't know how much you can control that. But it's kind of funny. I listened to that episode about the dog killer, and I think that that Katie, who does, I don't know, it's hard to say. I have I'd actually be fascinated to just have somebody do a really dry interview with Katie Herzog sometime. Jesse too, but especially Katie, because I feel like I have less idea.
I've interviewed Jesse in a kind of dry way, and as I do, and he was worthwhile. But I should talk to Katie sometime.
No. I actually interviewed Jesse twice. One of them is lost to the ages because of a recording problem, but the other one is you can find on YouTube. And Jesse, I feel like I have a little bit more of an idea, but really I would actually just be kind of fascinated, in Katie's case, be somebody just gave her an interview with there was just it was just a survey, it's okay, here's a political issue. Tell me what you think. Here's another issue. You're going to tell me what you think.
Right. Figure out where she is on that political compass,
Yeah. No irony, no layers of anything. Just up or down, next issue, just because I don't really know. I mean, even on the
death penalty, pro or against, that kind of thing.
Right? Yeah, no, exactly. Right. And even on, even on the trans stuff, I have, which is what people get the most mad at them about, although not the only thing. I think in Jesse's case, I have a decently good idea. I have a sort of vague impression that if we really drill down into the details, Katie might think some stuff I disagree with about that. But it's not, although also, I mean, my position, you know, is that the most like, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's also kind of funny because it is such a supercharged, you know, issue in the culture war that like, that we sort of excommunicate each other much more for having like slightly wrong views on that, right? Like even within people who basically say like, obviously you shouldn't be an asshole about what pronouns to use, you know, to refer to somebody, and obviously we should have anti-discrimination ordinances, and, you know, et cetera, right? You know, that they like that they're sort of like right on the brass tacks, you know, which I think both of them are, like definitely in Jesse's case, you know, but like, you know, when it comes to sort of slightly wrong theoretical views on that, right? Like I think we tend to excommunicate each other for a little bit more like, okay, do you think like, you know, there's such a thing as gender identity, or should we just think in terms of like medical dysphoria, or is there something in between those two categories that's helpful? Like it's like, I think we tend to be very quick to write each other off about stuff like that, which is kind of funny because like if you get like, because like if you were to do like structurally similar debate about other analytic categories, like, okay, you know, should class be understood as, you know, income level or relationship to the means of production, right? You know, then like,
but clearly
you know,
I mean, I think that's worth excommunicating people around.
You know, we actually should be excommunicating people for, you know, like, you know, but it's funny, right? Because it's like, I think I'm like a little bit like, man, I mean, like even, I mean, I'm supposed to be like this obnoxious class reductionist, and I think even I might be a little bit more tolerant, you know, like about people with bad views about that, you know, because like,
oh sure, yeah,
it's just kind of baked in, right? You know, like you sort of expect that it's like, okay, outside of your little socialist, you know, corner, right? Everybody's going to have kind of bad views about that and whatever. You know? Outside
of the platypus affiliated society.
Yes, the platypus affiliated society is correct. Everybody else is a little bit wrong because they don't understand.
Actually, no, I don't think they're actually right about class. All right, so listen, we've been talking for 45 minutes. I feel as though we had a nice chat. I hope that people enjoyed listening to it. It was not as focused as maybe some of my other podcasts, but people just have to bear with me. I'm going through a bit of a life change. I'm on Tinder. I want to reiterate that, and everyone should join us in the Patreon in the Parrot Room for an even less focused conversation where we'll talk about critical race theory, the platypus affiliated society, and more on Tinder. Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.